Hello, my name is Regina Keels. This is a presentation of my research project, The Impact of Library Book Clubs on School Reading Culture. The subject of my project comes from a lifelong interest in literacy, and it also comes from anecdotal comments made around reading in the high school where I work. Teachers and students would say, our students are not reading, I don't read. Well, students would say, I don't read. Students would also say, we don't read. And in more focused discussions in teacher meetings, we talk about vocabulary, and students don't know a lot of vocabulary, they don't know context, and they don't know a lot of illusions that would come from reading, and reading widely, and reading for pleasure. So, informally in my classes, I would ask my students through getting to know you surveys, and later on, when they're a little bit more comfortable, questions about reading, how they read, why they don't like to read, in an effort to inspire students to read more. And I would say in about 22 students, if I have a full class, there is about 5 students of the 22 who would say that they enjoy a full reading life. And that's not enough for me. I'd like to see a lot more. And as I move into library, understanding what I do in the English classroom to try to make an impact on students' impact attitudes towards reading. My question is, what can the school library do to change individual attitudes and poor reading culture in a high school? And with that, I started thinking about my library and the context of my library and what that means for students. The library has been closed for a long time due to the pandemic, and previously due to two Category 5 hurricanes that struck the Caribbean. I am in the United States Virgin Islands, and as a result of those two disasters, one natural disaster and one health crisis worldwide, our library has been closed for a long time. It is currently in a state of restoration and organization. Fortunately for us, we do have a library space that's well stocked with books. So having books is not an issue. Having good books is not an issue. What's an issue is because the books have been there for so long and they are in need of heavy reading, which is being done, and the library is in need of new and updated books, and that's being done as well. But the question occurred to me, is there a connection between the library, the state that it's in right now, and the attitudes towards reading that students have in our school? So if the library was up and functioning and had great programming, would that have something to do with how students regard reading? Would more of them make reading part of their lives? The objective of the study, therefore, is to ascertain the effect of book clubs on a school that has a poor reading culture. And I'm hypothesizing that if the school library implements a book club specifically, one specific activity that can change things, then the reading culture of the school would improve, resulting in more library usage and circulation of materials. And some questions I came up with at the beginning are, what factors that are directly related to the library affects reading culture in a high school? And how do book clubs encourage library use and reading culture? And I also want to know, how do activities surrounding book clubs affect the attitudes towards reading in a high school? So, based on a literature review, I found that to improve a reading atmosphere in a school, you do need to do something that's community based. So, building a reading community is a valid method of improving reading skills and not necessarily computerized programs. This resonated with me because many years ago I took a reading workshop with Kylie Bears. And she said herself that computers are fine, they do have their place, but what makes the strongest impact is the human component. Students need a community to build reading. So again, my question is, what does that look like in a library? Another bit of research that really helps me with my project and giving it legitimacy comes from the study, the analysis of reading motivation of high school students based on certain variables. And in that one, it said that socioeconomic differences do not make significant differences in motivation. A lot of our students are not what we would call wealthy students. But I like this because it means that those biases against a certain population, a certain amount of money that they make, that those don't apply to the motivation to read. And it also found that there was no difference between reading motivations of students and their parents. And that addresses a common thought, again, anecdotally, that because their parents don't read, they don't read. So what I think that does is it breaks down, like I said, some biases, and it opens up space for really researching and finding out exactly what would help our students in those areas. So, addressing the school population, knowing who our population is, we have about 900 students. Most are of African and Latino ancestry. There is a nice population of Asian and white students. It is a magnet school. The school also has vocational programs. And again, fortunate for these students, they do not have to move necessarily from one school to another by taking a bus. The majority of our students walk across a corridor and they are there in the vocational program of their choice. We also have a nice set of English classes, honors classes, excuse me, English that go throughout the entire school. So we have English honors, math honors, science honors. We have a nice set of classes like that. We also have AP classes across the curriculum. For this particular study, I would look at quotas and simple random, and my survey will begin with a survey of student reading attitudes and library usage. Some of the questions I thought of at the beginning: how often do you use the library? Once a month, more than once a week, once a month, never. And that question is to get the idea of frequency. So instead of saying we don't read, we don't use the library, now we have some way of gauging that. And then number two, if you do not use the school library, please explain. I would have open-ended questions on my survey, so then again, we're moving away from anecdotal into factual. And number three, the school library provides enough assistance with completing assignments for my classes, always, sometimes, never. And the purpose of that question and questions like it is to find out exactly how students are using the library, what are they looking for, and if there are any gaps, we could fill those gaps to bring students in and give them a sense that the library is there for them. The research design would be a mixed method approach. So it would be both qualitative. Once again, I want to really define what those attitudes and behaviors are around reading, in particular with our school library. And then quantitatively, collection of data that's related to circulation, student library use, types and quantities of books, and the results coming from programming around our book clubs. So for the pilot study, I would begin with a survey. And again, I want to find out their accurate thoughts about books, libraries, and book clubs. It would go out to about 90 to 100 students and leave in space for maybe some testing, and a teacher could give the survey or absent students. We're looking to get about 10% of the student population to survey. And then the case study would be based on the book club and about three of the classes coming from the survey, and it will be scheduled before lunch. And those classes that's in this case study need to come before lunch because students don't really have a lot of time to do library work or exploration before school, and they have no time at all after school. So I'm thinking that the time that the study takes place is very important because let's say there is an activity that motivates students to go to the library. doing that like fifth period, and then they can't go to the library, they might forget about it. So it would give them the opportune time to go from some activity that they enjoy to finding a book or finding a resource using the library. So, including the study or activities, interviews, observation is conducted in the main section of the library, and anything that might be a little bit more personal related to how students read, how much they read, how well they read, that would be done in an inner room in the library to avoid embarrassment. So with the data processing, I'm looking at recording the interviews at the beginning of the study, interviews at the end of the study, observing the students, and recording, of course, questions at the service desk. It's going to be paper and pencil method, and I'm going to code for grade levels so I can see if there's any difference between 9th and 10th, let's say 11th and 12th. So maybe coming in at 9th and 10th, they had one attitude, but let's say the 10th and 11th graders have a different kind of attitude. That would speak quite a lot to what's going on in a school where reading culture is concerned. And then, of course, interest in a book club and activities is tied to the book club, such as parties and book club, book talks. The study is put together in such a way that it could be not just valid, we want it valid, of course. It's going to be valid, but also that it's voluntary. So, whatever literature needs to go out to parents, teachers, students, administrators, so that they understand the purpose of the study and that they know that there is an opt out opportunity. Students don't have to take part in it. Parents have a problem with it. Their students don't have to take part in it. But also that every part of the study will be designed in such a way that students feel comfortable, um, that there's no duress, no discomfort, no embarrassment around student habits. The entire study focuses on being objective and focuses on being factual because it is about clarifying the anecdotal idea that our students do not read, to finding out how much they really read, and then what are some things the library can do in order to motivate students to read and create a culture and atmosphere of reading that's positive in the school. And then finally, this is an overview of what I would do. And here is where I would really need and appreciate some feedback. And these are the steps that I would take. And I'm thinking this would be what I would do in order from 1 to 8. So if there is anything here that you see is out of place, something that I'm missing, please go ahead and say that. I'm completely open. So the first thing is I'm going to survey my classes around reading habits and attitudes. Then I'll do the pilot study. After I do the pilot study, I'll set up the library book club with students from the survey group. The students will then participate in making decisions about book choices, discussion topics, and activities. And then they'll share their book recommendations outside, and that will give us an indication of who would then come to the library because of the book club. Researchers would then observe students in the library, record their use, the materials that they check out, their engagement, and then analyze the data. And then from the data, say what it says, what's the impact, and then use that to determine the effectiveness of book clubs for our school as a whole, and see how it adds to any research that's out there. So thank you for listening, and thank you for any feedback that you give me. And I wish you much luck on the end result of your project as well. Have a fantastic day. Bye bye.